Hi guys, it's Alyssa from Online Fabric Store. You guys have been asking a lot of questions on our dye videos, so we compiled a list of FAQs to answer some of your more general and very specific questions so you can be the most informed you can be before you start dyeing. So without further ado, here's what happens when I dye.
So a really popular question that we get asked is what happens when you want to dye over something that already has a color or that has been dyed before. And you want to remember that the rules of color mixing are key. Whatever color that you dye over is just going to mix with the new color. So we tested this out with a hot pink polyester bathing suit cover-up and we used Purple Rit Dye-More. So when it was done drying, the sheer fabric that made up most of the cover-up was this nice magenta color, but the cotton blended lacy material turned into this dark eggplant color. It's important to remember that synthetic materials are a lot harder to dye and they require a lot more time and heat. So another question that we get asked a lot is what happens when you dye over screen printed designs? This is kind of a tricky question to answer, but the same kind of rules apply as before, especially if you're using Dye-More. In many cases, the all-purpose dye is not going to affect the vinyl screen design because it's a synthetic material. So that was the case for this purple shirt that we dyed to a richer shade of purple, and the vinyl printing stayed the same. But when you're using Dye-More, keep in mind that the vinyl is probably going to dye at least a little bit because it is a synthetic material. Another question that we get a lot is, can you dye over a pattern? And the answer is yes, but the same rules are going to apply with the color mixing. So we took a pink and white patterned shirt that's made out of all the same material and we put it in Purple Rit dye. Since they were two different colors to begin with, the white turned into a nice purple color that we saw on the Rit dye bottle, and the pink turned into a pretty magenta color. You may be able to make the pattern fully disappear though, like in the case of this next project when we tried to get black. Getting black is a question we get asked all the time because it is really hard to do with dyes. You're best off using the stovetop method, using a little extra dye, and also using fixative. Also keep in mind that thread is often made of polyester, so it will stay the same color with all-purpose dye. So we were just about as successful as anyone could be getting this green-colored shirt to turn black. Getting straight black is going to be really hard, especially if your fabric is made out of synthetic material, so keep that in mind before you start dyeing. Another thing that we get asked a lot is, can you dye something that has buttons on it? And the answer is maybe. Dyeing buttons can be a little tricky because you don't often know what the button is made out of. I tested out an assortment of buttons in both the Dye-More and the all-purpose dye baths, and most plastic-based buttons only turned color in the Dye-More bath. Both dyed the wooden button. And another question that we get asked a lot is, can you dye over bleach stains? And the answer is yes, but your results are going to vary. So this green shirt had been accidentally bleached a few years ago, and it was really faded in some spots. So we tried it in a dye bath, and it worked pretty well, but in some places you can still see the outlines of where the bleach had stained. I did notice that some of these items dyed unevenly. To prevent this, it helps to use a larger dye bath so the fabric can move freely, and make sure to stir it thoroughly the entire time that you're dyeing. And if you're using powder dye, make sure to fully dissolve the powder or you'll end up with little colored specks. And if there's something in this video that we didn't cover, please let us know in the comments and we will try to get that into our series and make sure that you know all that you can know before you start dyeing.